Teacher Talks to Go.
We are back. We're excited to be back.
Yes, and today we're going to be looking at some common classroom management mistakes. We found a really great article that we thought would be good to share with you guys. And it's called, if you want to Google it, it's called A Dozen Common Mistakes and What to Do Instead. I love that part. And we will link the article in the show notes, but you can also Google that.
Yes, and we're not going to go over all 12 of those mistakes today. We're just going to touch on some of the ones that kind of spoke to us and comment on those. And the first mistake that we're going to talk about today is when a student does something inappropriate or disruptive, asking them, why did you do that?
That's a mistake.
Why is it a mistake, Jessica?
Well, so the article says, and this is so true, sometimes our students don't know why they did it, right? They just did it. Or if they do know why they did it, we probably don't want to hear the answer, such as, well, this class is boring,
right.
Or I don't think you like me.
Right.
So what I do love about the article is for every mistake, it tells us what to do instead of that. So instead of saying, why did you do that? What should we do, Greg?
Well, we've got to figure out, instead of asking the student, we've got to figure out what the root cause is ourselves. And we've got to do a formative assessment of the misbehavior and just kind of pay attention to the student and watch them closely and try to ascertain, what's driving it. So the example they gave in the article is a student named Olivia. It says, if we notice that Olivia is teasing her friends at recess because it's the only time she gets their attention, we've got to teach her to get peer attention in a better way, such as sharing or asking to be invited to join in a game. That seems like an elementary example.
Yeah, that does.
Yeah.
I know. I'm trying to think of like a middle school or high school example. I mean, the same thing. Many times the root cause is attention. Wouldn't you agree, Greg?
I do. Or boredom.
Yes. Because students are going to get attention, whether it be negative or positive. So a lot of times we need to think about a positive way that they can get attention. But whatever it is, you need to be able to teach and reinforce the appropriate behavior instead of the behavior that you don't want. And this particular mistake and solution really made me think of the book that we've referenced before, You Can Handle Them All. Because in that it talks about, okay, this is the behavior, and the very first step is identifying why the behavior is occurring.
Right. And I think a lot of new teachers just think, oh, this is just a bad kid.
Yes.
Or this is a bad class. And I wish I had a better class. I wish I had better kids. And it's all kids are going to be kids. And I do think escaping boredom is like one of the biggest problems, and that's a root cause. And you think you've got bad kids when really you just need to go back to your lesson planning desk. And
really keep them engaged. Like,
yeah.
I think sometimes there's a lot of downtime or like just trying to get through the day. But if you're really keeping them busy, which touches on another one that we're going to talk about.
It does. I know we're getting ahead of our notes.
But yes, so that's a good one. So figuring out why they're doing it. Another thing this particular one mentions is, and you can't do this with every student, but just picking out one, thinking about what happens before the behavior occurs and what happens after, because that might also be some clues as to why it's happening. And just one other thing, Greg, I wanted to mention.
Sure.
Is I think sometimes it's helpful to video ourselves, right?
Yes.
And you don't have to share it with anybody, but I know when I was doing national boards, I realized because that's a requirement of that, and I realized some things that I was doing that I wasn't aware of, like sometimes my back was to the class more than I realized, or I might be standing in a particular area of the classroom more than others. And so just watching things yourself, and you might see things that are happening with students that you didn't know was going on.
Yeah, and if you're a beginning teacher for Harnett County Schools, and you can have your R&R coordinator, Jessica, myself, Michelle, Carol, or Alicia, come out and observe your class. Like if there are times of the day where things are going on or whatever, like usually it's after lunch, right after lunch, or the last class of the day or whatever, we can come in and be that outside set of eyes and maybe pick up on some things that you're not noticing. That could be it could be an easy fix.
Yes.
Sometimes.
Yes.
Yeah.
Just being aware.
Yeah.
All right. So the next mistake is when an approach isn't working, try harder. You might be thinking, well, why is that a mistake? But the problem is sometimes we're trying harder in a negative manner.
Yes. So we're being louder, we're scolding them, increasing the negative content, more silent lunch,
Oh
more
gosh,
silent lunch,
that just came up.
removing more privileges, and and it says in the article that doesn't do anything to teach the correct behavior. We're just raining down consequences and negative speech to them, but we're not really talking about what to do instead.
Right, and sometimes trying harder might be like, okay, everybody's getting silent lunch till Christmas.
Right.
And so that's not fair either, because that's not reinforcing the positive behavior of the students that are doing what they're supposed to do. So instead, they suggest that you try another way, right? So what's something else that you could do instead of what you're doing already? Now I will say, when you try something, you got to be consistent at it at first before you totally abandon ship. But and what are some ways? How can we find ideas, Greg, to try another way?
Well, I mean, we could talk to our mentor. We can talk to us. We can try things that we have taught in PD many times, like proximity control. Instead of immediately barking at them, just move closer to them. If you haven't tried that, we can try praising them instead, or praising the correct behavior. And the article says teacher praise is easy to deliver, and we forget to do it many times. But we should praise correct behaviors sometimes instead of focusing on the inappropriate.
For sure. So also you can do reinforcement at home. So whether it be positive or negative. So Mr. Griffin, I just wanted to let you know that Isaiah has just really been trying hard lately, and I've been so proud of his effort. I know that he has, in the beginning of the year, he wasn't completing a lot of work, but I've really seen a lot of improvement.
Mm-hmm.
Or just the opposite, you can make that parent contact to let them know what's going on, because parents don't know many times unless we.
Yeah, and I love this tip in the article here. I think this is just golden. So if you don't hear anything else, hear this today. So if you have a kid that's supposed to be working on his math stuff and he's over there talking and partying instead, it's more natural to go over there and go, I need you to get quiet. Talk about the inappropriate behavior. Stop talking. So it says, don't make more stop than start requests. So instead of going over there and telling them to stop talking, I go over there and tell them to start working instead. So I focus on what I want them to do, not what I don't want them to do. And I think it's so natural just to go get quiet.
Right.
Instead of, hey, I need you to be working on your math.
Because we don't want them just sitting there silent. We
Right.
want them on task.
Exactly. And so I think that's just, and then after they get on task, then we praise them. Good job getting on that math task. So I think that's just a simple little strategy that just makes sense.
Yeah, and even if they have, let's say there's 5 questions that they need to answer, even if you're like, I want you to get this one problem done and then we'll come back and check. Because sometimes, the work can be overwhelming.
Mm-hmm.
All right, next mistake is treating all misbehaviors as won't do's. I love this one. At first I was like, oh, what does that mean? But it says that sometimes we treat misbehaviors exclusively as a motivational issue. And sometimes that is true. We're not saying that that's not true. But sometimes, instead, we need to think that some behaviors are can't do's. Sometimes our students are not able to do what we're asking them to do or not do.
Yes. Or there's an academic can't do that's fueling the misbehavior as well. But it says we should deal with can't do misbehaviors the same way that we deal with students' academic mistakes.
Yes. So again, we're going back to identify the context and the predictable behavior, when and where it's occurring. We have to be very specific about what we expect them to do instead, and then systematically modify the context. So whether that be changes in instruction or task, schedule, seating arrangements, etc. And then conduct behavior rehearsals where the students practice the appropriate behavior. And this might need to occur not in a whole group setting. I think for elementary you can practice it whole group, but it might be embarrassing for middle and high school, and we don't want to do that. And I want to circle back to what you said about an academic issue, Greg, because many times if a student is behind or below grade level, the work is too hard for them, and so instead they know they're not going to get it right or they're not going to understand it. So instead of being embarrassed about that, I'm going to come over here and create a circus
and party.
Right. And right. So maybe just understanding that and meeting them. Where
Yeah, and I'm just thinking about like in middle school, you know, it's like they just refuse to work in groups. Well, maybe they haven't been taught how to work, you know, functionally and effectively in groups. Maybe you need to teach.
How to.
This is how we work in groups, and assign roles in the group and give each person a responsibility and model what you want and hold them accountable for that, instead of just saying, yeah. Because I remember in the early days of teaching, I would just say, get in groups and give them something to do. And there was no guidelines. I didn't go over what I wanted, what it should look like, you know, or anything like that. And
Yes, and even in elementary, middle, and high, I remember with my first graders, when I first was introducing group work, I would get them in a circle, and then in the middle, I would have me as a part of the group, and I would have like 2 or 3 others, and we would go through what it should look like together. And so that's a really good point.
Yes.
Yes.
And so you might want to consider next time as someone being disruptive or disrespectful or whatever we don't like that they're doing, that there might be something that they don't know how to do that's fueling it.
Yes.
Okay.
For sure. Okay. Next one is, I feel like we like to preach about this one, but it's just,
a lot. Yeah.
but we can't say it enough. Lack of planning for transition time is a big, big mistake. You must appropriately plan for transition time, because that's when a lot of the madness occurs. So oftentimes, you know, we're thinking about what standard we're teaching, which we should be, please, my goodness, plan for your standards. But we're just saying that you've got to plan for those transition times, like, you know, in elementary, coming from their seat to the carpet, getting in line. Like, you can't just say line up. We're going to line up one group at the time, and if we don't do it correctly, we're going to go back and we're going to reinforce those positive behaviors. You know, same thing with middle school, transitioning from maybe the teacher modeling, then we're transitioning to some sort of group work like we just talked about, and then transitioning to independent work, and how that all looks different.
Yes, and it says in here that inconsistent expectations cause transition problems. And also, I love this, and I've been saying this for years, the teacher is often transitioning with the students, so they're not paying attention. You know, so that we're between activities, so I'm resetting my slides or I'm checking my email while the kids, I don't have my eyes on the kids, but we must be vigilant at all times. And I love this little tip. The instead behavior is to appropriately plan for transition time. But once we've taught it and we've modeled it and they know what our expectations are, and especially if it's not a transition that we haven't done in a while, I love this tip to post the transition rules, have a student volunteer to read them before transitioning.
Yeah, that's good.
Yeah, this is how we do. This is what the expectation is. Don't forget.
That's right. Yeah. And throughout the year, we have to do that, you know, especially at the beginning, but then we have to be reminded.
Yes.
The year.
Yeah, and I just want to thank you in advance. Our powerful words.
Yes.
Middle school works great. Middle school.
Yes, we love those.
I want to thank you in advance for transitioning in a timely, quiet fashion.
And that goes right into this next mistake, which is inconsistent expectations and consequences. We can't just tell them on the first day or the first week what we expect and then think they're going to do it the rest of the year, right? We have to follow through with the consequences and positive reinforcement, because a lot of times they're getting mixed signals, right? Like, okay, you say this is what you want to happen. You say we're supposed to sit in the seating chart, but then all of me and my friends come in and sit where we want to, and you don't say anything. And then 2 weeks later, where, you know, the teacher's fed up because the girls are over here talking and the boys are playing, and then because they're sitting with their friends and they're not in their seating chart, because we haven't consistently enforced.
Yeah, and we read a book a few years with the BTs a couple of years ago that had a quote in it that I think is extremely powerful, and that's that the consequence should match the offense and not your current mood. So the inconsistent consequences come about when we're angry and we heap a heavier consequence on the kid than the behavior plan has spelled out.
Right.
You know, so that's why delayed consequence is sometimes better. We don't have to issue the consequence right on the heels of the misbehavior. We can say, hey, we're going to talk about this later and get back to the lesson. And then we calm down so we're not saying things like silent lunch until Easter.
Right.
Yeah, silent lunch till Easter. You know, because then you're not. That's where we get to be inconsistent, and we're perceived as inconsistent and moody.
Because we're over here not enforcing anything, and
Right.
then we all of a sudden are just fed up, and then
Right.
we're putting them, you know.
We're raining it down on them.
Yeah. So.
Yeah.
Well, I think these were super helpful today. I loved the suggestions for things to do instead, and hope that maybe you heard one that you were like, oh, I can see how that might be helpful in my class. I'm gonna try that.
Yes, and there's a ton of stuff out there, you know, I just found this by Googling. I think I did an EDU search site, :EDU space, and then you type in and then you'll get some research-based stuff because it's going to be in the university systems. But you can Google the article easily, 12 common mistakes and what to do instead if you want to read about the other ones that we did not talk about today. And we have a great episode coming up next time.
Oh, yes.
Yeah, I just want to do a little commercial for the next episode, so you can tell a friend. So we did a communication episode. I think it might have been one of our first ones, if not the first one. Might have been the second one.
I think it was the second one.
Yeah, and we were talking about student communication, and I said, hey, wouldn't it be a good idea if we could find some good things to say to students as comebacks when they say something inappropriate or they're trying to be shocking or disruptive, what to say instead. And so I sent out a little Google form. We sent it out. We made a little Google form asking some of our best teachers and mentors in the county, hey, what do you say when a student says, I don't like this class? What do you say? If a student says, what were some of the other ones that we said? I don't like this class.
You're boring.
I don't like you, or why? Yeah, you don't like me, or something like that. And we have got some great responses that we're going to share with you next time. So
yes, we've got some good ones coming up. We're going to have some special guests, and we'd love to hear your feedback too. So email either one of us, G Griffin or J Moss, if you have an idea that you'd like to hear on the podcast. We'd love to hear from you. So thanks for being with us today, and we'll see you next time.
We'll see you out in the schools.
Yeah.